Good morning, everybody, to the councillors and the people who may be watching online, and to the public in the back of the room and our very valuable submitters. We have one apology this morning from Richard Wilson, and the rest of us are all here, so thank you. I'm just going to remind councillors briefly of the rules on the guidelines related to these deliberations. It's an information gathering initiative process, and it's usually the normal process is for the submitter to be given 5 minutes to speak to their submission and a further 5 minutes to answer the questions. The questions that the elected members ask the submitter are to clarify matters raised in their submission only and not to give our opinions. And questions posed by submitters to council are not normally answered in this setting. Specific common questions are often answered in a response to submitters at the end of the process, and the questions to officers are normally dealt with in the deliberation phase. Given there's some concerns and time constraints, we will be deliberating on this topic on the 7th of August at 9 a.m, and that will again be open to the submitters and to any member of the public that wishes to attend. So, do I have any questions from anybody? No? Okay, I'd like to invite, please, is it Glenn McLaughlin?
He's joining virtually, but he hasn't arrived yet.
He hasn't arrived? Oh, Tim, can we invite you up, please? Tim Tarbotton, just because Glenn's coming in virtually and he's not here. Is that okay with you?
Yes.
You've got people you need with you?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Now you push the button on the right and there should be a little red light. Yep. Now you're live.
Awesome. Hi everyone, my name's Tim Tarbotton and I'm here also representing Stuart Tarbotton. We're landowners and also a local business owner with an earth moving company here in Ashburton, and have operated here for 35 odd years. I'm submitting feedback basically because in mid-Canterbury we see flooding becoming more and more common, and over the years we've witnessed what we think is potentially poor decision making and lack of progress when it comes to recognising the need for critical cut-off drains upstream of urban areas, along with considering the flow-on effects of those drains to landowners downstream. Cut-off drains are often dry, but when we experience major rainfall events, these drains provide a secondary flow path upstream of our urban areas, Ashburton and Tynwald, and this allows the stormwater surge to flow straight out to the river and reducing the volume of water that flows through our town and potentially flooding and causing damage to downstream landowners. Some examples of this, and this may be mentioned by other submitters, but I'll go on to what I have here anyway. The first one is the cut-off drain known as Hepburn Drain, which is the Ministry of Works Lateral 6. This runs along the top of Coniston Water and I think West Park subdivision of Hepburns Road. I understand that in recent years the council made the decision not to accept ownership of this drain or its associated easements when it was offered to the council by the Ashburton-Lyndhurst irrigation scheme. Since then the drain has been filled in or left to degrade, and despite being clearly identified in the council's WSP Opus 2018 report as part of the managed urban stormwater network. I do have a report, I don't know if it's available to show on the screen, just of the figure 6 to 4 from that report on page 38.
Hold on a moment, Tim, we'll just get that up for you so we can have a look at that.
Yeah, so what I'm referring to here is this lateral here in the red. So this basically intercepted any floodwaters that came from this catchment up here through down Racecourse Road and Hepburns Road, and basically intercepted it and took it out to the river to prevent it flowing through the urban area. Now that drain has been filled in parts and is no longer providing that purpose, and therefore we've now got increased flows running down the Wakanui Mill Creek. The second sort of example is Carter's Creek, another well-known creek locally. We believe that upstream of Tynwald here there needs to be a similar sort of thing, a cut-off drain which intercepts the rural catchment, basically in heavy rain events intercepting that heavy flow and taking the water out to the river instead of having it flow through the Tynwald township. Being a civil contractor, we're often the first ones that get the call when properties are in flood because people are panicking, and we see this stuff firsthand. We've been involved with a subdivision on Tarbottons Road where Carter's Creek basically flooded its banks and started flooding down the road and into people's properties. It provides a lot. It's very stressful for landowners, and we're very limited in what we can do to help. But we think that these cut-off drains upstream of urban areas, Ashburton and Tynwald, would provide a massive protection to these areas. The other thing I just wanted to say was in regards to, obviously with the Stockwater network being sort of decommissioned eventually, what effect filling in drains may have on upstream and downstream landowners. We think that when drains are filled in, some drains provide vital drainage and stormwater control for certain properties, and I think there just needs to be a big picture approach to how we go about filling in these drains and the impact that it has on landowners upstream and downstream. Where our quarry is on Fraser's Road, there was a case where a property downstream from us, the drain was authorised to be filled in, and therefore the stock water ran down the side of our quarry. We had a significant rainfall event, which has occurred many times, which resulted in it toppling its banks and flowing into our quarry, which actually caused significant damage to our facilities and our machinery. Now, if modelling had been done on that race, it may have been that changes needed to be made to that downstream drain before the initial drain was filled in. But I guess what I'm just trying to say here is we think that we need to take a approach to stormwater looking at the big picture, not property by property, but looking at it in its entirety. And we think that these cut-off drains, number one, are vital to that. And also, with filling in these stockwater races, we do need to consider where is that water going to go, because it's going to have to go somewhere, and who's that going to impact. So just in conclusion here, with the climate change and sustainability strategy, I guess what we are urging is that there's a clear acknowledgement that past infrastructure that has been decommissioned does have consequences of flood risk. And we think there should be a commitment to revisit the role and the relevance of removed assets like the Hepburn Drain Lateral 6, which is shown here on this plan here. Support for a catchment-wide approach to stormwater planning rather than a piecemeal site-by-site fix. Clear mechanisms to prevent downstream landowners from altering critical drainage paths without upstream impact assessments or regulation, as in where's that water going to flow when it's filled in, who does it impact, is the new flow path able to withstand the volume of water. And most importantly, a renewed investment in cut-off drains upstream of urban areas to intercept surge events and protect our downstream communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your written submission as well. That was very clear and very precise. Do we have any questions from councillors for Tim, please? Oh, thanks, Rob.
Thank you. Tim, the Hepburn's drain was RDR,
Yep.
And has now been incorporated into private property, I believe.
Yes.
What would you envisage happening with that now, if it's already been incorporated, some has been filled in, most been filled in?
Yeah, I mean, I went and drove and had a look at it the other day, and it is a real shame to see that it has been filled in. In terms of the solution going forward, I don't have the answer for that, but there are portions of that drain still open, and I think if many of the landowners that were downstream of that knew that that drain that was once there that provided protection had been filled in, they would be probably a bit upset to find that out. I knew the drain was always there, but I never actually realised it had been filled in until I actually went to the Methven Highway and looked that can no longer flow out to the Ashburton River. I have got, is Glenn McLaughlin online? So I've done a bit of work with Glenn. I don't know if you have any comments on that, Glenn, in terms of...
Yeah, hi team. Yeah, over the years, and it's probably more in terms of what Stu let me know, that drain I think has been filled in the last around maybe 5 years ago, or within the last 5 years. So it has been quite recent, and probably the main concern is just that it's there's an understanding and an acceptance that the stockwater races or the rest of the Ashburton-Lyndhurst scheme, there would be parts of that could have easily been filled in because they're running down contour and not necessarily providing for the drainage infrastructure that Hepburn's Drain in particular provides protection for. With Hepburn's Drain itself and its location and its strategically upstream of the urban environment, that's the critical one, and previously been acknowledged in the WSP report and or flood modelling for the township itself. So that's why it was so surprising to see that when the opportunity presented itself to take over the easements and have that drain in some form, it might not have needed to be to the depth and the size that it was, but it was a key part of the stormwater management system in that northern part of Ashburton.
Thank you, Glenn. We just got 2 more questions from Councillor Mackle.
Glenn, with your information, was that drain was its purpose ever for protection of the town, or was it solely put in for RDR?
Can we just stick to? We're not having the deliberations at the moment, Rob. We're just
Okay,
we're only able to, in this capacity, ask questions.
Fair call. My other question is for Tim, with on the other side, with Stockwater being exited by council, who would you envisage being responsible for keeping those drains clear, etc., in the future if they were to remain open for drainage?
I think what we're more getting at is there just needs to be a bit of a process in place with that, and a bit of regulation around when drains are filled in. I mean, the water has to go somewhere. What we've found is often when drains are filled in, the water still naturally tends to flow towards those drains. And we've seen cases with subdivisions where stockwater races have been filled in, and when it really starts to rain, the water still comes. So, and I don't really have an answer to that, unfortunately. But I guess I just want to bring awareness, unless you have something, Glenn.
Thank you. No, we won't. We'll just move on to Neil Brown's question, please.
Oh, thanks, Tim, for presenting. It's well done. Think about that irrigation. It was an irrigation race, and it was used for the tail race of the Ashburton-Lyndhurst when the surplus water coming down went straight back to the river. So everyone's calling it a drain. It was an irrigation race. So,
yeah.
And I'm just wondering, when it was an irrigation race, if it was used as a drain, how did the water get into it? Do you know?
Yeah, I don't know the details of that, but I know that now that it's not in place, when the water comes down Racecourse Road and Hepburns Road, the only place for it to end up now is in the Wakanui Mill Creek, whereas previously it would have been able to end up into that irrigation ditch, I understand. But at the moment, I guess we've got a problem with Wakanui Mill Creek, where there's a lot of stormwater during surge events going down there with unstable banks and things like that. And I just think that was a great opportunity to alleviate the pressure on the township and for all those, protect those downstream landowners with having that drain accessible to the river.
Yeah, and I've had a look at the drain myself, and on the Racecourse Road end it is filled in.
Yes.
On the State Highway 77 end it's not.
Yes.
But when it goes under the road, and I'm unfamiliar and I don't know, was it piped to the river from there, or was it an open drain from the river there? Do you know?
So I went to Methven Highway, and looking back on historic maps, I could see that there was an open drain there, which has now since been filled in, and is, I guess, a paddock to someone. I tried to have a bit of a look, but obviously I could only see what I could see from the road. But behind Coniston and West Park there's still a significant drain there, and it's actually huge. So, and when you look at it, you think, oh, thank God that's there, because if we did have a big flooding event, that drain, I guess when it was still operating, would have intercepted heavy flows and taken it out to the river.
Yep. And just on stockwater, if we exit and there's no stockwater in the races and they're left open for drainage, that water's got to go somewhere. Someone's got to end up with it.
Yes.
Obviously, the top of it, you're fine. If you're at the bottom of it, you're going to end up with the water and they possibly wouldn't want it, I wouldn't imagine.
Yeah, like in the case at our quarry, the downstream, where the original race was, that was filled in, and there was just a bit of a sort of what I'd call a supplementary creek. It wasn't very deep, but what happens is there's obviously the catchment up above that, and when we start getting significant rainfall, the creek that it was diverted into just cannot handle that stormwater. And it may be that when the stock water, well, that creek in particular is actually spring fed, so there's always going to be water going down it. But I think in that instance it would have been good just to look at, okay, we're going to close that drain down, that spring water is going to be redirected here, but we need to make sure that that creek, where that water's going, is going to be able to handle that, especially during surge events.
Okay.
Agree 100%, Tom. Someone's got to look at it. Generally, council does stock water drainage as EKen's responsibility, but
Yes.
obviously we need to both talk to get a solution
Yes.
in the future.
Neil, we're at the end of our time, and I've still got two more questions from the other side of the table. Thank you. Councillor Todd.
Thank you very much. It's good to see who's in charge here. Thanks, Tim, for your submissions. Very good. In your conclusion, you have made some recommendations.
Yes.
Are you confident that if implemented, they will mitigate the issues that you've raised?
Yes, we're very confident, especially even looking at Tynwald, you know, the potential of putting a cut-off drain there to protect the township. Carter's Creek, I hear it being mentioned often at meetings and things and in the paper, and I think it's sort of, when you look at the plan and like that, where you see the township and you see that there's these vital sort of drains, cut-off drains that could be put in place and maintained to provide flood protection, I think, yes, getting it to the river and getting it out to sea instead of going through the township.
And Lane, you're the last one, please.
Tim, just a quick question. The water level in Tynwald is pretty high.
Yes.
You talked about the pit before. Is that forward water from groundwater over the last
no.
couple of weeks or not?
No,
It's
the
been
quarry,
dry.
our quarry, which is 5 metres deep, is not full of groundwater at
No
the
water
moment.
at all.
No,
Okay.
no, and we have groundwater monitoring bores, and we collect monthly data all around there, so we're aware of what the groundwater's doing. So we've got that sort of data to see what's going on. But yeah, in the flooding instance that I referred to in the submission, that was when the stockwater race basically overflowed, and once it starts building up on our property, it just basically works back up the network, floods the farmer upstream of us, and everyone's trying to get the water off their property, so everyone's sort of trying to do things, and it just keeps going. So yeah.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Tim, for a very well presented and well developed, complete submission. We
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're very welcome to stay and listen to the other submitters. We'll invite everybody for a cup of tea afterwards, or you're welcome to go, whatever.
Thank you.
And as I mentioned earlier, we will be deliberating on the 7th of August. Thank you. Glenn, are you available online now for your submission? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is it fair to take the submission as read? Because I was just sort of come in at the last minute, and I'm happy to answer any questions or really get to the main point. I feel as though coming in on the back of Tim, he's actually quite succinctly covered most of the same issues, and I believe that my slot here was in regards to the Tynwald submission from the Dobsons or Westview, but the same issues are really present in Tynwald and in Ashburton. In Tynwald, we've got probably the situation, and I might just, if I can share my screen, to provide some context.
Glenn, you've got 5 minutes. You can do it any way you like. We have all read and reviewed your submission, so you're welcome to spend it as questions, or you're welcome to highlight any salient points you think we need to be reminded about, or however you like to use that.
Okay, perfect. I'll share my screen now, and then we can go from there. So if you can see this, looking at the wider Tynwald area, ECAN have already achieved an easement corridor that comes down over part of Carter's Drain and out to the river. Their plan is to actually physically build that drain within, I think it's in their funding for sometime between now and in the next 3 years. So I believe they were trying to achieve that outcome sooner rather than later. What the submitters that live further down in the urban environment were trying to get at is that's part of the problem. The other part is the historical stockwater races that still come down to the site that, yes, they've been closed and they can be filled in, but they still exist and therefore convey stormwater down to an urban environment. The Dobsons have been proactive and talked to some of the upstream landowners. Initially, what needed to happen is trying to tie in with ECAN, and I don't know if you can see my cursor, but we need to try and tie in at or above the corner there, so that whatever ECAN do to take it out to the river, if there was a further cut-off drain extended out to Tynwald, Westfield, Mayfield Road, that it sits above that, so that it could drain. So Taggart, they approached them, but they weren't interested in being part of the discussion. However, Neville Nelson, who's the next property up, this property here, he is interested and willing to be part of the discussion. So potentially there could be an option of connecting Tynwald Westfield Road through, which would provide further protection to the more southern part of Tynwald, alleviating some of the concerns with Lagmore and Carter's. So it's probably one of those things that Tim touched on as well. It's just really having council taking a lead and cross-agency engagement to try and get those outcomes that protect the downstream urban environment, and the same exists on the other side with Hepburn's Drain. I mean, in this instance, you've actually got ECAN trying to achieve something, whereas on the other, we probably missed an opportunity.
Thank you, Glenn. Is that the end of your oral submission?
Can be on, available to answer
Answer questions. Do we have any questions in the room for Glenn, please? No questions? Oh, yes, and the Mayor's got a question for you, Glenn.
Yeah, morning, Glenn. Just thinking about the Carter's Creek, or the line you've got drawn up there, and ECAN's going to do some work on it, and it'll protect the southern end, which needs a little bit more work. Southern end of that subdivision, or of Tynwald, you say, it needs to have a bit more work done on it to assist that.
Correct. I mean, in an ideal world, you would have probably more of a situation like Hepburn's Drain, where the actual drain is closer to the urban fringe, because there is obviously still a reasonable rural catchment that's probably close to 900 or a kilometre, almost a kilometre upstream of where the town boundary is. But and it's never just one thing. Like a cut-off drain is it's part of the equation, but it's never the silver bullet. Subdivisions always need to provide for their own stormwater management these days, but a cut-off drain is a big piece of the puzzle to help provide resilience and protection.
So the consultant who was working for the developer, should they not have alerted them to this?
What you've got to do is have allow for that water to flow through. So the secondary flow paths through the development, and they follow the natural servitude of the land.
So when a subdivision is done, what does the subdivider do with the stormwater that they gather with their subdivision?
Well, they can't retain the stormwater that is coming off the rural land. They just have to allow for it to flow through their property. So they have to manage the effects that are created with their own development. So when they're putting in a road, or there's impervious surfaces like roofs and so on. So you're dealing with the difference between pre and post development of that site. But in terms of outside of the development, that's you can only control it to the best that you can, and that's conveying it through the site.
So the
So
idea,
it's not fixing downstream issues with the likes of Carter's Creek or the infrastructure downstream, because you can't, like an individual can't do that.
so the objective of this design or this race is to take the water, stop it from coming into the subdivision and send it straight to the river before it gets there.
It's dealing with the large rural catchment that sits above, like Ashburton's not dissimilar to a lot of Canterbury Plains towns, where you have you've got contours that flow down towards the coast, and there's large rural catchments. So how is that being managed on a catchment-wide basis? And that's where that cross-agency and local and regional authorities sort of need to take the lead on that.
Do you have any examples of where this would have happened elsewhere in Canterbury?
Well, it happens in a lot of places, but you've got, I guess, the likes of Temuka. You've actually got the Temuka River that has got flood protection, stop banks, and it's very much case by case where what are the natural features that sit above the town or across that contour, and then how is that managed? So in some instances it could be a stop bank to contain a larger flow for the river, but I guess in Selwyn you might, I'm not familiar with if they've got specific cut-off drains, but I guess what I'm saying is that in Ashburton's situation, you've got, if I zoom right out, you've got these large rural catchments that come down, and even though there are some strategic interceptors that are further upstream, when those get overwhelmed, or the catchment between, there's still that ability for floodwater to get to the existing urban environment. So providing that resilience by a cut-off drain is a good mechanism.
And the way it's coming down across from the rural land, is it coming through a water race or a stock water race or an open drain, or is it just coming over land?
All of the above, really. So it'll track its easiest route. So it could be following road corridors, it could be following existing stock water races that haven't been filled in, and it will follow the natural contour of the land. So what you tend to get is that in a decent event you'll get the water, the water starts to build up, and then even on green pasture land there'll be little depressions, and once the ground gets a bit more saturated, then it starts to build up and flow along the contour that it can.
Thank you.
Thank you. You have, Councillor Mackle, you have a question?
Yes, Glenn, not knowing that area as far as fall goes, with the water that we're talking about would be happening in an event with that drain running parallel to the road, is there enough fall to cope with that, with a heavy rainfall event, because the likelihood the river will be well in flood? Would the river then be able to take that excess water if it's already chocker?
That's more than I can answer at this point. That's really something that I think through working with ECAN in terms of what they have got planned, and then trying to join the dots to see what solution might be able to be achieved with connecting out to Toowoomba, Mayfield, Westfield Road, then that would be the next thing to investigate. I guess the point of providing the feedback that the submitters have is that there should be a holistic view looked at this, and be proactive about trying to factor it into your strategy, and then make sure that there's an element of funding with an LTP or whatever, and working with ECAN to try and make something happen if it's achievable.
Thank you very much, Glenn, for your submission. I think there's no more questions in the room, so thank you very much, and appreciate you calling in this morning.
Let's go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to invite Phil Everest up, please, for his submission, and if councillors could go to page 79 on Stella, they'll find that submission. Welcome, Phil. The floor is yours.
Good morning, Karen, and good morning, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on the draft climate change and sustainability strategy. I'm going to focus on 2 of the 6, sustainable water management, nature-based solutions, and the transfer to low carbon. Water is clearly the lifeblood of the Ashburton District, and as we've stated, you've stated in the draft document, water needs to support the economy and the agriculture in the sector. To me, there is a significant omission in terms of water storage in the current document. Various predictions of climate change would show or predict perhaps a more intense events that will occur. So we may have less snow, we may have more water in the rivers at specific times. Will the less snow be offset by significant nor'west rainfall? So as water is our lifeblood, will we have an opportunity to store significant water? And I would encourage the council to include above ground storage in their strategy. Clearly we have significant below ground storage in the stones below our feet, but do we do something with the above ground storage? So I think I'd like to see something included like that in the strategy to enable that through our policies. The nature-based solutions and the Infometrics report was actually quite interesting in terms of that. And just to refer it to everybody, I mean, 60% of our land mass is covered with crop, is used in crop, 44% in grassland, 38% is already indigenous forest, and 4% is covered by houses. So already we've got a significant area within the catchment. As we've driven for water use efficiency and pivots have replaced less efficient application forms, there's clearly been a reduction of shelter and trees in our catchment. Farmers have rapidly expanded those planting areas, particularly in natives, in the last 10 years. And I think that's been significant contribution while we're trying to learn what we can do under pivots particularly. And some of the new FEP QA programs include planting requirements to meet their audit requirements. So I think some of those things are going to happen. We just need to make sure that it's enabled and we encourage it. The transition to the low carbon future. Agriculture is still our main industry in the district. And the strategy really hit home to me just where we sit. Our emissions sit at 66 tonnes of CO2 equivalent per capita compared to the nation of 15 tonnes CO2 per capita. So clearly we've got an issue that we can identify in our community. From the 2007 to 23 report, our emissions locally have dropped 5.7%, which surprised me, which is well below, however, the New Zealand average of the same period. The dairy companies in particular, but industry also, have already implemented emissions reduction plans, and both Fonterra and Synlait are developing work programs through premiums to encourage farmers to make those reductions. We do not want production to be shifted offshore to less efficient producers, which would lead to detrimental impacts in the world. And I think we've got to look very seriously at how we actually deal with that. Just as a passing comment, I'm just back from a 2-day conference in Hamilton looking at groundbreaking science in terms of plantain, which is a herb. Most of you know it as a roadside weed, that little wee round plant that sticks a rat tail head up in the summertime. The research has basically shown now that a 10% increase in plantain in our swards would reduce our NLOS by 10 to 15%, but also significantly the early stage research would actually show that 5% is also likely to be a reduction on the greenhouse gases from the same plant. We already have plants within our catchment above 10% plantain. We just need more farmers to take up these opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Now, do we have any questions for Phil? Lynette, please.
I'm just going to ask about if we need more water storage. Where do you see this happening? Damming up rivers or creating a lake or?
Definitely not damming up rivers. We all know that's not an option. So it's off-river storage, but it may be that we don't need necessarily take a lot more water than we're already taking in flood flows. We just need to divert a little bit of water off for some storage. But who knows what climate change is going to do, but what we don't know is what it is. So let's enable those sort of, enable those events in our strategy.
Thank you. Mr Mayor.
Yeah, welcome, Phil. You talk about our rivers, and the Ashburton and the Hinds in particular, threatening our towns, and the flood control structures we have. Building stop banks higher might not be the solution. So need a wider path of water to flow. Is that meaning to move the stop banks out? Is that what you're suggesting?
There's two parts, Mr Mayor. One is to actually have a wider area which the water can flow in, but still contained. And I think they've done quite a lot, well, I know they've done, because I've just been looking at it, quite a bit of work in the Hawke's Bay, specifically looking at those sort of things. So whilst you still might have a stop bank that is, sorry, I've got ears in the bloody phone ring, sorry about that, old age. While the stop banks may still remain, we may have another further stop bank further out, which may help control that flow, which could still be farmed. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it won't be farmed, but just in those peak flow times, it will mean that we can slow the speed of the water and hugely increase the capacity. And I think, look, it just comes down to basically just an engineering, if you like. I mean, if you think about a pipe, if you double the size of the pipe, if you increase the pipe size by 50%, you double the flow rate. Yep. And I think exactly the same thing applies, well, I know exactly the same thing applies when we start talking about strategy across floodplains. So it's something we've got to think about, but it's a huge cost to the community, and particularly those that are residing close to the river. But it's something we need to think about.
Thanks. And store more carbon in our soils. Is the Irish already doing it? We're not picking up on that, are we?
We're not. Week before last I was in Wellington trying to promote that. I think the government now has actually started to acknowledge, and Dairy NZ and Beef and Lamb are also acknowledging that may be a significant sink, and that's something that we can really work on. Just quickly for you guys, the Irish have actually used a tool which measures solar radiation in, reflected solar radiation out, and gases that move over the ground they've got a stalk up 3 metres, and it measures the gas flow for 100 metres. And so they're able to calculate that under their pastoral system they can gain 1.2 tonnes of carbon per hectare per year on average over 20 years, accepting that in some years it goes down because of climate events, and in some years it goes up more. But over 20 years, that's pretty hard science to argue against, and their climate and environment and soils are very similar to ours.
Very interesting, thanks for that. And last question is, riparian planting could create more flooding while enhancing biodiversity. Just expand on that, why it could create more flooding?
Yeah, Councillor Mackenzie and I have a little bit of a spar in that. I'm of a view that riparian planting can be helpful, but it is likely to slow the water flow. And so if I speak specifically on our property, in a big rain event, we're underwater for 70% of our property is underwater for a day and a half. Whether it's a day and a half or 2 days, to be honest, doesn't make a lot of difference from a management point of view. And so if those riparian plantings slow the water up a little bit so that when they get to Councillor Lovett's place and below heading to the beach, it becomes less of a problem, then maybe that's a good thing for our catchment. My son would have a slightly different view, saying, Dad, all you've done is put water on the farm for another half a day, but maybe that's a thing that we have to think about as a community, as a strategy.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you. Tony, you have a question for Phil?
Yep, thank you. Thanks, Phil. I do agree with you on your water storage. I think that's vital. I was going to ask you a question on what is 66 TGHG, but you've replied on that too, which you've informed me on that. Just on question 12, you say we need to think harder about our rivers, particularly the Ashburton and Hinds, etc., that could threaten our town. That's more of an ECAN thing rather than us. Should we be banging on ECAN's door? What's your thoughts on that?
Our district council is our voice, and I think that that's really important, that we are strong if we agree, sorry, I mean, whatever the council agrees, but I mean, we are strong in our approach for our community. ECAN's got a wide catchment to look after, and clearly, yes, they look after the rivers, but we need to be pushing them and encouraging them in the areas that we think are important to ourselves, and maybe offering solutions from our community. So the short answer is I think it's vitally important for us. I mean, if our Ashburton River decides to flow through the middle of town, we're in trouble. And I mean, if you're at Hines, the same things apply, or if you're at Mayfield, the same things apply. So, let's look at it as a total picture for our Mid-Canterbury team and stick together.
Thank you. Lynette, yours is the last question.
Okay, I'm just going back to the carbon emissions. We know the Paris Accord doesn't count all the kilometres of the biodiversity the dairy industry is doing. Does the dairy industry know how many kilometres there is on farms and calculated the carbon, sink within that?
Yes. So Fonterra are getting that information together now. All companies are trying to get it together under their QA programs. We are scrambling, but for your information at the council here, Mid-Canterbury Catchment Collective are also gathering all of that in a graphic form, so that information will be available publicly, but for the council to see what improvements have been made over time. We need to gather that information. Bluntly, Ireland can count every tree growing on their island, and in New Zealand we can't do that. They do it from a satellite. We have the same satellites flying over above. We just need to harden up. There's plenty of solutions out there.
Thank you very much, Phil. We appreciate your very well researched and great submission. So thank you very much.
Sorry about the phone going off.
No, just before I forget again, everybody's invited for a cup of tea after all the submitters are finished, so you're most welcome to stay. Thank you. I'd now like to invite Edith Smith up, please, for her submission. For the councillors, it's page 25 on Stella. Welcome, Edith. You've got 5 minutes to present, and then we'll have 5 minutes for questions afterwards. Thank you.
I'm looking forward to hearing more from all these presenters regarding climate change.
Me too.
It's a great start.
They've been wonderful. Yeah.
Yes. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. And I'd also, just reading my submission, like to congratulate the Mayoral Forum on the publication It's Time Canterbury. The Canterbury Climate Change Partnership Plan was developed by the 11 councils, and it's a worthwhile read, a comprehensive document demonstrating the unified progress towards tackling the issues that the climate change crisis may present. And I'd also like to acknowledge the District Council climate change policy, which was adopted quite early on in 2022, and there were some contributions from major submitters at the time, which were very comprehensive and very relevant and important to climate change, and that input was invaluable. And already when I'm just sitting here listening to the input from just 2 or 3 people, I really appreciate the opportunity that I had to take part in the climate change stakeholder meeting in February. It was really heartening to be part of the discussion among community members from a variety of backgrounds, and their identification with climate change issues, particularly in the Ashburton district, was really encouraging. The contribution from the group proved to be a valuable resource of people familiar with climate change, all with a range of points of view. And I would like to recommend that the establishment of a climate change advisory group similar to the ADBAG, to the Biodiversity Advisory Group, representing the community, they would be able to contribute their expertise to the council, and hopefully result in, as we have with the successful biodiversity outcomes for climate change. So just moving along, relating to river flow and wetlands, the Ashburton-Hukaturi River is one of the most important braided rivers in Canterbury and nationally as a braided river bird breeding habitat. Climate change resilience and processes to mitigate drought episodes must not be at the detriment of river flows and enhancement of our natural freshwater ecosystems. In recent decades, excessive water abstraction has resulted in an over-allocated and polluted river. The climate change policy should prioritise, following a decade of delay, that the river meets the agreed new flow of 10 cubics at the Ashburton River Bridge by 2032. Climate change may also have extreme impacts, wet and dry, on remnant wetlands, springs and ephemeral wetlands alongside the Ashburton River and its tributaries. These need to be identified and protected, and their water sources enhanced for them to survive in the future, while also making room for potential floods. Rural impacts. The New Zealand-wide methane emissions have risen substantially with the increase of dairying to among the highest per capita in the world. We're up there with China. Methane from agricultural sources contributes to half the country's greenhouse gases. The national dairy herd has doubled since 1990, and the associated increase in the use of nitrogen fertiliser also adds to our carbon footprint. The Council must acknowledge the district's contribution to New Zealand's emissions and support any adaptation that might reduce climate change impacts from this source. Everyone should be expected to reduce their carbon input. Biodiversity loss. In our highly developed district, we have already experienced serious and permanent loss of native biodiversity, both terrestrial and aquatic. It has occurred since early settlement, but more particularly in the last 2 or 3 decades, when knowledge and science about the significance of Indigenous biodiversity should have been better understood. The Council Biodiversity Plan identifies the ongoing loss of native vegetation, particularly on the plains and in the high country areas. Vulnerable dryland ecosystems will be under greater threat from new plantations, fires and more intensive land use. It is vital Council implements or enhances their own district plan rules to protect native habitat already impacted by rising temperature from land use change, as climate change carbon sequestration by exotic forestry planting is used in rural, foothill and high country areas. Much of this land still has remnant native vegetation or landscape values. A climate change policy should include planting programs that prioritise and protect these local native biodiversity ecosystems. They might not be big trees or immediately obvious. Our foothills landscapes are an integral part and feature of the district and deserving protection. Identification of possible landscape loss and potential remediation should be considered before any new plantation planting is proposed. Ashburton climate policy could lead change to prioritise the reinstatement of upper plains and foothills original native forests to sequester carbon. Some effective native species restoration is already taking place as sequestration in New Zealand, and our local species such as matai, beech and totara would also provide this benefit. Wilding pines. Restrictions on sequestration planting in rural sea are essential if we are to protect the precious dryland and tussock landscape. Forest and Bird and Clearwater hut holders and others have spent many hours weeding wildings. In 5 years, Forest and Bird has removed over 43,000 wildings from dockland near Lake Heron and elsewhere. The seedlings are all emanating from neighbouring shelter belts.
Edith, can I just interrupt you for a moment? You're just beyond your 5 minutes. Do you have very much more to run?
Well, you know all the story about the wildings, don't you?
Yes, we
Yes.
do. Yeah, we do.
Yes.
And we're very cognizant of that, actually.
Yes,
Yeah.
and so we really want to focus on if there are to be enhancing forests and shrublands, we should focus on our native species that are available to us.
I'm not able to cut the councillor question time down, so do people have questions for Edith, please? Mayor Brown.
Thanks, Edith, for your submission. You talked about half the methane gas from New Zealand is from agriculture. What's the other half from?
Oh, I can't tell you that research. That was related actually to dairy farming.
So you also say everyone has to reduce carbon. Everyone has to. How would you see we would do that? Everyone do it.
Well, I think just producing a climate change policy that can actually be very inclusive for the local community to be involved. And I don't sort of see it's immediately dealing with rubbish. You know, there are other things, and even to have an awareness about how significant the river is, and value that. Understand, you know, from what Phil has said about water storage and whatever, it is really just as this policy is. Hopefully very inclusive. That's how I think that it's quite important, because once people sort of get the gist of what they might be able to do, you know, there's many people that have reduced or changed their dietary habits, or when it's suitable, or of that walking instead of driving, and as we see, just even petrol-fueled vehicles these days are far more economic, but you know, the move to solar power and that type of thing, I see that the Ashburton district, being fairly wealthy, is in a position to be a leader in dealing with climate change.
Okay. And you also mentioned about the loss of native vegetation over the last decades. Just focusing on perhaps the last 5 years, and a previous submitter was telling us that the dairy companies and the catchment collectors are going to find out how much has been added. Do you know how much has been added over the years? Or are we still losing?
No.
Is we still losing native forest?
What you're providing is there's many artificial waterways and so on along in the Canterbury Plains, and this is no reflection on and what Synlait and Fonterra are doing, in particular Synlait with their million trees and the expectation that their farmers will all plant along their waterways. That's an obligation of being a Synlait contributor. And I mean, this is absolutely really valuable and important. But what I see is the natural heritage with the foothills bush. We have a bush side, that history, and I would like to see more of a focus on replacing what we've lost of our own native vegetation. The selection of plants that are used on the waterways are definitely not what we saw on the plains, and they've sort of been selected in a random way because they're sort of generally Canterbury sourced, but we're changing our whole ecosystem these days, which I don't have a problem with, but I would like to see that our foothill, the remnants that we have in our gullies and around the Summers to Hutt foothills in particular, that they are restored, and in fact, if there's an opportunity to extend the bush further out into the upper plains.
And that, if it was planted in those species, that would sequester carbon. Is that what?
Yes, there is a question about the sequestration of carbon in native forests. They are slower growing, so naturally this is means that there's a slight disadvantage in comparison with radiata. But I just, you know, on your hands and knees, crawling around, pulling out radiata and Douglas fir, you know, both timber trees in the upper country, I can just see our whole landscape could change. But not only that, I don't want to impede on farmers' plans for sequestration, but, you know, square patches of radiata being planted along our landscapes are almost as relevant as biodiversity to us. I mean, they are regarded as significant. You would agree? Yes, we do. We know that. That's an understanding. And I just think that we need to have take care not to lose what is really special to many people.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one final question from Councillor.
Thank you. Hi, Edith. Just a very quick question. You mentioned a climate change advisory group. How can you see this working at council?
Well, in a similar way, it brought, like, people around there. I'm certainly not to detract from what the council do, but the likes of James Mackenzie, not that he might have time to be sitting around a table, but, you know, what he in particular, and along with others, brought to that meeting, it was a room full of ideas and information. And I mean, even people that are submitting here might be ideal to be part of that.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Edith. Appreciate your submission very much. Thank you. I'd now like to invite Chris up to present his submission, and that, councillors, is on page 4 in Stella. This is Chris Bell. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you for allowing me to present to you. I'll make mine short and sweet because
Oh no, you've got 5 minutes, so
unwell
take your
prepared. Just want to say that defining climate change, I find that all my life is climate changes. And then we hear on the media scientists have got lots of information on that, but then there's also a group of scientists out there disproving a lot of what's work we've been presented with. So this is a bit of a moving target, but probably my main concern is when I got to the back page of that long document, the new spending that is intended for climate change measures, something that's not been budgeted for, which I added up to, and correct me if I'm wrong, 7,450,000 over 10 years. Is that right? That's all got to be found from somewhere, and I'm just a farmer, but you know, when we're getting these increased costs and so forth, we're in some way have to try and overcome those, and usually it's increased production or whatever, and sometimes that works against what we're trying to achieve here, and how would I put that? So we increased our costs. We got to grow more stuff. Mm-hmm. So if we grow more stuff, then we'll end up with more methane, more transport, and it goes against this climate change model. So some of the science in that I don't agree with, and I think you'll see that elsewhere. But my main concern is this increased spending, and it's not on, from what I could see, not actually physically fixing things. It's a lot on education. I know that needs to happen, mm-hmm. But yeah, being a farmer and a ratepayer, the increased costs worry me.
It's a legitimate concern, I think. Do we have any? Have you finished your submission, Chris? Do we have any questions? Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. And I think I've just looked at the table, and I think you're probably correct in that 7.45 million. But I see one of the major costs is 5 million, which is for water metering. So just wondered on your views. Do you think water metering is a good idea in townships? I know you're in rural area, but
we've been doing it all the time. And that, for me, so I irrigate, so I have water meters. Metering costs probably not great, but probably in the last 20 years that I've been metered, I've had to change the meters. I've probably used 3 on each well, 3 new meters. There's a big cost every time I do that. You'll put meters in around the town if it's anything like my irrigation meters, that you'll put them in, and within the 10 years you'll be, unless they're good meters, you'll probably be replacing them. So you might have a budget there for 5 million for meters. You might end up needing to spend 10 million. Mm-hmm. These are all increases in our rates, and I already find that they're quite high, and probably some of those things that, like roading and stuff, sometimes are not as good as they could be or have been in the past. So, yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for Chris? Have you got your hand up, Phil? Yes, you have. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Chris, I did some research on one of the scientists that you mentioned, Ian McIntosh, and watched a YouTube video of him submitting to the Christchurch City Council. I found him very interesting, informative, and he was basically saying that there's not a hell of a lot we can do here. Since I think he was talking the Industrial Revolution, we're following trends that are long trends with the planet. Are you coming from an angle where we should be looking at our infrastructure rather than maybe education is where we were spending some money?
No, I'm not qualified to do that. Yeah, I'm just a simple farmer trying to do my business, but I do hear from those scientists that are disproving that the narrative that we've been fed by the media and so forth. So I just want to put that out there, that some of these things that we believe in actually can be disproven by someone else.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Councillor Tony Todd.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Chris. I just like your comments, maybe or your thoughts on climate and on climate change. Do you believe that weather patterns have changed, like getting heavier rainfall or more droughts or hotter weather or colder weather, which is obviously they say is climate change. So are you in that camp or are you in a different camp?
I'm a farmer, so I see a lot of climate events. It changes all the time. I probably don't believe in the science that we're being presented, because I've seen scientists disprove some of the science that you might see on the media. It can work both ways. Sometimes it's cherry picked and some important data's been left out, and it mucks up the model. Another thing I see a lot in working with, I'm working on Waitaki District Council at the moment with their district plan, and we have houses in Amarama, and the whole of Amarama Township, apart from about 3 houses up on the hill, are classed in a flood zone. Now, there's no historical data that there was ever floods there, and the funny thing is, now this is I read the information, it was all desktop modelling, but that modelling is easily proved wrong even by me, because at the Benmore Township there's a house 60 metres up a hill that has a small catchment behind it, is in the floodplain, and I mean if that lake increased to 2 metres, it would take out the Benmore Dam. So how can that be? Yeah, sometimes the science can be proved wrong, and scientists have done that.
I have one final question, please, from Councillor Meckle. And then...
Thank you. Chris, you said a couple of times you're just a simple farmer. I don't believe this day and age there is such a thing. It's a high-end business.
Yep.
And as such, you've been water metering, planting trees, etc., doing your bit as a farmer. Would you agree that council would also need to be seen to be doing their bit for climate?
Yes, but my worry is try and do too much and costing the ratepayers too much.
Thank you very much, Chris. I really appreciate the time this morning, and please, you're most welcome to wait for a cup of tea in probably 15,
Thank you.
20 minutes if you'd like to. Thank you. Peter Glewis, please come forward and present your submission. Thank you.
Can I just
Welcome,
get
Pete.
Sarah to hook up a map, just a
course,
picture
yes.
of somehow? Not quite sure how we do that.
Femke's out there, she may help you there.
Mine is not connected. Would you maybe email it to me?
Yeah.
For the councillors, Pete's submission is on page 47 of Stella.
Is it the map from the station or a different map?
A different map.
Just the town map. Would you be able to email to me then?
Yeah, is there Wi-Fi?
It doesn't mean I can start anyway while they're setting that map up. It's no big deal. My submission, well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's a microcosm of the bigger topic we're here to today, and mine's more to do with the water around Allenton. I bought a house in Carter's estate, so I've just put it out there that I've got a vested interest in the area and the water management in that area, and hence my little dissertation here. But it is prone to flood, that area, and the whole of Allenton's susceptible to it. So I've done a bit of research to find out sort of, what are the things we should be looking at, and perhaps an idea of two that the council might consider. So there's two issues here, or there's two sources of water that are going to flood Allenton. First one is the main river, Ashburton River, and that was breached a couple of years ago, and luckily got some farms above Digby's Bridge rather than the Allenton Township, or the Allenton area, if you like. So the first question is, do we have good solid banks along the Ashburton River that are going to stop that happening? And I don't know the answer to that, but I hope that's the case. Or that water breaks out into those farms again and rather than town. But the second one is really the effect of rainwater. And in the recent rain, we had about 7 or 8 inches overnight, and we had a lot of water around our places. Luckily, at Carter's estate, along with a lot of other subdivisions, there's been a collection point, and there's a pond in the subdivision, and that water can be fed back into the Mill Creek, or Wakanui Stream as it's also known as. What it's become known, what I'm sort of concerned about is the effect on Mill Creek of all this. Now, if you've got all these subdivisions collecting water, including some major establishments in town and round, and more subdivisions being looked at, Mill Creek's not going to be able to handle all that water. So what do we do about it? And I've come up with a couple of things, more suggestions and thoughts to consider rather than answers to all this. But it seems to me that the Wakanui Stream is not going to be able to handle the future water demands that are going to be placed on it. So how do we handle that? I think the first thing is that the water for Wakanui Stream, or Mill Creek, is sourced from the Ashburton River, and initially was put in back in the dark ages to feed water into the Ashburton Domain. Now that source could be blocked off. In a storm situation, why don't we just block the water off coming down? It's a simple solution to me. And if you don't want to block it off there, you can block it off at Smythes Road. Now there's actually a creek. There's a stream that comes down Racecourse Road, Methven Road, and it blocks off and goes into, well, no, it doesn't get blocked off, sorry, it's redirected into town and goes down into Mill Creek, through the centre of the Allenton area, if you like. That also has a tributary or an opportunity to block that off there and send it back through Smythes Road, where there is actually a race that could be cleaned out. Now that's not a hell of a big job, it's not a big distance, and it wouldn't take much of a bulldozer or a digger to clean that out. So that's the first option that I consider that you can have a look at. There's also a race near Coniston, and I've had a look at it. I think it's on Gary Haskett's property, and I shouldn't really be mentioning names here because I haven't spoken to Gary about this, but I don't think he'd mind me saying it. But anyway, there is quite a big, deep trench, if you like, that's in a low-lying area in his property that would be, again, a clean-out job, and it would store some water, again, feeding back into the Ashburton, feed back into the Mill Creek. So that's another thing to have a look at. The other one that I think is worth looking at is the existing race along Farm Road from Racecourse Road to Mill Creek. And that would, again, so you're looking at the first one, sorry, these maps here, but what I'm trying to do is actually get rid of the water before it hits the Allenton area. And that first one up at near Coniston would be one break, the next one down would be on Farm Road, and again, they're all feed into the Mill Creek. But, I think the other one would be to open up the culvert at the end of Hepburns Road, is another suggestion. Now, we've got a photograph of that here somewhere. Yeah, so that's what it was like a couple of weeks ago when we had all that rain. Now that's it's might be only a couple of feet deep. It's been filled in, but you know you can see the amount of water that's trapped in that thing just in a bit of overnight rain. If that was opened up again, and only just that area, it would again act as a bit of a resilience to the town of the Allenton area. So those are my suggestions, and I think that you know Ashburton's a vibrant town. We need to insulate the town from future water events, and these are just some of the suggestions for it. So thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you for your submission. And as you say, a picture tells 1,000 words, really. So there. Do we have any questions from councillors? Yes, Neil.
Thanks, Peter, for your submission. Just looking at that picture, it's holding water there now, so that's probably a good thing. It'll just soak away. Obviously, there's a depression there. Do you know the landowner? And they filled it in for a reason because they wanted the land back, I suppose.
Well, I don't know the answer to that. I don't even know who owns it. I think it's a new guy that's taken over the place at the end of Hepburns Road, just below that. So his place was just below, I think. That's straight across the road from Hepburns Road.
Yeah.
Hepburns Road, Racecourse Road. And to me, it was part of the Lyndhurst irrigation thing that, unfortunately, I missed the talk by Tim, and I'd really like to have heard that because he would have probably elicited some comment on this as well.
At the other end by State Highway 77, where it goes under the road, and head from there to the river, was there ever a race there, or was it piped?
You're talking about the one at the end of Smythe Road?
Might be.
The one where it first talked about blocking off the thing, or are you talking about the Lyndhurst irrigation side of things?
Yeah, the Ashburton and Lyndhurst race, that race at the other end, the other end of that, right at State Highway 77.
Yeah.
It goes under the road.
Yeah.
You can see the ditch is still open, goes under the road, and then you see nothing. It's all filled in, or is it piped from there to the road?
Oh, look, I can't remember that part of it. I don't know whether it's an option to actually relitigate that stuff. It would cost I mean, I don't know the answer. I mean, obviously, it's been put in for a reason in the first place for irrigation, and some of those have been filled in there, and I don't know whether that's the total answer. What I've tried to do is come up with answers that can be done very cheaply. You know, to relitigate the Lyndhurst irrigation easements may be a step too far. I don't know the answer to that. But I've tried to come up with ones that can do now and not costly.
Yeah, thanks for alluding us to those.
Yeah.
Well done.
Thank you. Phil, you have a question?
Yeah, I do. G'day, Pete. I guess I'm following on from Neil, and you've maybe said that you haven't done this work that I'm going to ask you about, but if underneath State Highway 77 was opened up again, it was pushed into the river, do you think the river could handle it? And I'm thinking of our bridge, etc. Has anybody in your group done any sort of thinking around that?
Look, no, but I think that if you blocked off the water coming out of the river in the first place, I mean, there was an argument that you can't put water back into the Ashburton River if it's dirty. Well, if it's coming out of the river just, you know, half a mile or a mile up the road, well, what's the difference? You know, only just feeding it back in. The simple answer may be just to block off, you know, the Wakanui stream at its source, which is the Ashburton River, during a storm situation. That cuts out a lot of water coming into the town before you even start. Now, that to me seems like a fairly logical and simple solution.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you. Any more questions for Pete from anybody? No. Thank you, Pete.
Yep,
hang around if you can for a cup of tea. Otherwise, thank you for your submission.
Yeah, will do. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Thirsty now.
And now I think our last submitter for this morning is Kieran Breakwell, and I understand he's online. We're all ready to go. Are you there? I can't see you, Kieran. Oh, you're there. The floor's yours. Can we go to page 35 on Stella, please? Can you hear us, Kieran?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep, perfect. Away you go. You got 5 minutes to submit, and then we'll have 5 minutes of questions, if
Can you
that's
see me at
okay.
the moment?
We can't see.
No,
Sorry,
we
can
cannot
you
see
see me?
you. No, but we can hear you.
Sorry, I'm just trying to sort out the camera situation. Certainly not an expert on technology.
None of us are. We won't hold that against you.
Okay, apologies. It looks like you're not going to be able to see me, but I'm sure you won't be too disappointed. So yeah, I'm Kieran Breakwell. I've been a rate payer and local developer in the area for 20 years now. I'd like to thank the council for carrying out this process and having the public in to have their say and taking the time for that. My submission touches on a few things. It touches on some concerns with previous decisions from council, in particular the Hepburns Drain and ongoing potential flooding issues from that. I'd like today to focus more on another part of my submission, which is funding. And I believe you can't have climate change and sustainability strategies and working through those type of processes without funding. Over many years, council staff have said to me on several occasions, we don't have any money, or there's no money in the budget, there's nothing in the budget. That's a pretty common sort of a response when we're trying to work through problems. I want council to understand that development in the area is crucial for the area, for ratepayers, but also for council. Development contributions, reserves contributions, consent fees, new rateable properties, as well as local businesses reaping the rewards, all add millions to the council income. Developers and councils should be working together to achieve the common goal, and I'm concerned that that's not always happening. Ashburton's a great place to live and to do business, but I know that we can do better. Over the years, I've had dealings with the Timaru Council and Selwyn Council, and to be honest, the experience of dealing with those other councils compared to ADC can be chalk and cheese. Also, when I'm dealing with consultants, often out of the area, engineers, surveyors, lawyers, I regularly hear comments like, we don't have these same issues dealing with other councils. So those things really concern me when I hear that. Also, when trying to work through issues on different developments over the years, council staff, and I'm trying to work through whether something is viable to continue the project or not, and we're having that discussion with staff. Several times staff have said comments like, well, don't do it then. I'd like to think the council staff can see the value to council and to the local economy for developments to go ahead. And I don't think council should take my word for it. I think they should engage with other developers. There's developers in the area that have been doing it much longer than me, that have far more experience, and I engage with them regularly, and we're all experiencing the same sort of issues where things are just harder than they need to be. Another suggestion for council would be to do a field trip to Selwyn. Selwyn are incredibly positive towards local development, and maybe that's why they're one of the largest growth regions. Another thing I wanted to comment on, early in 2024, government put out a infrastructure acceleration fund, and I'll just read part of it there. It says it was to provide councils with funding to support delivery of critical infrastructure, transport, water and flood management projects. So that was a fund, I think it was several hundred million, and local councils could fill out a submission to approach government for funding towards those areas. When I approached several staff at council, no one seemed to know anything about it, and they weren't even aware that it was a thing. One of the people I got put onto was the economic development manager. He knew nothing about it. And in the end, several council staff went away and looked into that process and come back and said that it wasn't something that they would follow and they weren't going to do anything about it. That was rather disappointing. And my understanding is that both Selwyn and Timaru applied for funding through that process. I'm not here today to have a go at council, rather in the hope that we can work together moving forward to make some positive change. I'd like to see a culture in ADC where local developers and the council team work together to achieve a common goal and continue to make the area prosperous. Thank you, that's all.
Thank you, Karen. I'm just looking for lights on around the chamber. Does anybody have any questions for Karen with regards to his submission? Yes, we've got Councillor Ellis has a question for you.
Good morning, Kieran.
G'day. Oh yeah.
Good. Hey, just wondering, just with your submission and its relation to climate change, are you talking there's difficulty around like flood-prone areas and that sort of thing with development, or are you just talking more in general?
A bit of both. So I've obviously mentioned in the Hepburn's drain issue, and I think I won't talk about that too much because I think you've already heard from several people about that in more detail. But I think that was a mistake, letting those easements go, and I think that's having an ongoing effect on the viability of future development in the area. Yeah, that's kind of where that's coming from. And to link in my funding thing is, you council need developments to happen to create that money, which then gives you the opportunity to spend money on infrastructure for flooding protection, those types of things. Another area that I'll mention there is council at the moment are expecting developers to do a piecemeal type infrastructure for stormwater retention, and from our experts we're being told that is not the most efficient way to do it, and it's a risky way to do it, and council really need to take control of that and get a strategy in place going forward so that there's some sort of a global stormwater retention situation, and then developers like us pay for that, so we're charged for the use of that, rather than developers having to go out and do individual little stormwater retentions, which is inefficient and more costly.
Thank you, Karen. We have one final question from Mayor Brown, please, Neil.
Yeah, just on that fund you're talking about, Kieran, I think it's the Regional Infrastructure Fund, or they call it the Shane Jones Fund as well, where you can get money from it to do regional infrastructure. It's not a gift, it's a loan, and it has higher interest rates than what council can borrow at the moment. So we've investigated it as council, but we haven't taken any up. We could borrow monies cheaper ourselves with our balance sheet, but we do know about it.
Thank you for the clarification, Neil. There's no further questions here, Karen, so thank you very much for taking the time and for your submission this morning.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. So now we've reached the end of this morning's program. I want to thank all the submitters. They've all been very informative and well researched and thought-provoking. And as previously mentioned, we'll be deliberating at 9 o'clock on the 7th of August in open meeting on the submissions that we've heard this morning and on all the submissions we've received. As an aside, I'd like to request the Chief Executive to be prepared for questions around flood mitigation and stormwater control on the 7th of August. So thank you for your attendance this morning. Everybody in the room is welcome to join us for a cup of tea, and I'll declare this hearing closed. Adjourned. Thank you.